It's like buying a car from a manufacturer and they go out of business and the car disappears. You wouldn't do it, would you? But we do it every day with software. We do it every day with cloud services.
So critical software doesn't usually fail with sirens flashing. Sometimes it fails because a supplier disappears, support dries up, or a cloud service simply goes dark. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to episode 123 of Resilient Supply Chain, Stories and Strategies that Keep Business Moving. I'm your host, Tom Raftery. In this episode, I'm joined by Wayne Scott, GRC Solutions Lead at Escode. Wayne works with regulators, major banks, and critical service providers on supplier failure, service deterioration, concentration risk, and stressed exit planning. We'll unpack why outsourcing a service does not mean outsourcing responsibility, and why the real question for business leaders is simple. If a critical provider failed tomorrow, could you keep operating? Let's get into it. Wayne? Yeah, welcome.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Wayne?
Yeah, of course. My name is Wayne Scott. I'm GRC Solutions Lead at Escode. We're the world's largest source code and cloud escrow provider. I myself, I have an unusual job, really. I handle our relationships with the global financial services regulators. I write our consultation paper responses on any new regulation around the wonderful topic of resilience, but I focus on three non-cyber related risks of supplier failure, service deterioration, and concentration risk. Well, I spend a lot of my time advising globally systemically important banks, financial institutions, and their big providers on policies and standards and procedures around something called stressed exit planning.
Okay, we'll get into all that. Let's start off, first off, for a lot of people listening might not be aware of what code escrow actually is. So can you give us a 101 on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's an old school British invention. It's the idea, really, that if you want to keep things working, you've got to have oversight and accountability and documentation and reporting behind it. So sitting behind every bit of software, every cloud service is source code. It's what makes software run. Well, if a supplier fails, if they go into administration or bankruptcy, or if they get taken over by, maybe unscrupulous new supplier who wants to downsize them or right-size them or forced migration over it. So, that software that you're using then becomes a risk on some level. But if the supplier completely disappears under a standard license arrangement, you don't have access to the source code. That source code's needed to maintain the service going forward. So what we do is we store all that information that you need to carry on using that service going forward under a legal agreement, an escrow agreement. And then what we do is we do a knowledge transfer, essentially document how to use that source code, how to rebuild it, all the ingredients involved and a shopping list on where to buy them. And then finally we test. Can somebody follow that instruction manual? Can we test, can it be rebuilt in something called a scenario test? It's all the stuff that you need to carry on using whatever the most important software is or cloud services going forward.
And you talk about financial services. Should people outside of financial services care about it?
Yeah, the vast majority of these software companies do operate horizontally, don't they? And it may just be one one financial services market. They might go for banking, insurance, and accountancy, or legal, or everybody only really uses one operating system. But you've got large accountancy packages in the UK that deal with 40% of the invoices in this country, and CRM software that accounts for 27% of the entire market. If you depend on software and the supplier operates in the market, they're subject to market forces, then escrow is applicable across the board. So everything from critical national infrastructure, financial services, energy, defence, refuse collection. If it's important that the thing carries on going and it uses software, we're in scope for use.
And what business processes would you say are most exposed if a critical software provider fails or deteriorates?
Well, within financial services, it's pretty well defined. Anything that handles or touches money, anything that underpins the sort of infrastructure of things, anything that touches people or customers, those kind of things. Increasingly, there's a better definition of these things. Everything used to be critical or non-critical, but now this concept of important business systems and services is being introduced across the board. The stuff that connects the important things together. It doesn't necessarily perform a critical function, but if it disappears, there's disruption and it falls down. Within financial services, definitely is getting a more mature attitude on an understanding of criticality and importance and stuff like that. Also, anything that's got a long implementation or deployment time or procurement process, the standard operating procedure for a fintech or even any kind of technology company is to be sticky, to be hard to remove, to not be interchangeable, to not be substitutional. So if you take a look at how many times an application is upgraded, maybe over a 2-year period, or patched or fixed or somewhere along the way, if that procurement process is longer than the average upgrade process, then that's a risk, because if things disappear, that service is going to deteriorate over a X amount of time, a period.
And why has this become so much more urgent in the last few years? What changed?
Well, obviously I'm a little bit biased to say it's always been urgent, but if you look at massively oversimplifying this, if you look at the root causes of the financial services crashes in 2007, 2008, that was a concentration of very risky debt in countries and organizations. But all we've really done over the last X amount of years is introduce a new kind of risk, a new concentration risk in the form of technology, in the form of software, in the form of cloud. And that's just carried on and gathered speed under this wonderful banner of outsourcing over the last few years. And is obviously set to continue. It's been rather conclusively proven that following every economic shock, companies fail. Operational risk instances increase. It might not be linked, but there's a correlation between it too. And all of these companies are subject to market forces. Nobody's immune from takeover. Nobody's immune from financial instability or insider trading or internal fraud or cyber attacks, those kind of things. And when these risks happen in quick succession, they compound and combine and eventually materialize a lot further on down the line, bigger and bolder and much, much worse. And if you kind of look at what we've had over the last 8 years or so, we've had some of the biggest economic shocks in the history of economics in rapid, quick succession. Brexit, COVID, wars, genocides, high energy prices, austerity, I'd argue, is a problem. Entire countries losing power, bank failures, the rise of far-right politics, tariffs, more wars. This is good for financial stability, never mind societal stability. None of it's good for financial stability. And if this kind of financial instability hits the technology supply chain, what initially starts as operational contagion, like Cloudflare, that was not even an important piece of software and it caused damage to a certain extent globally. But if it's critical software, it starts off as operational contagion and really does have the potential to turn into financial contagion, which is better known as crashes and recessions and things like that. Yeah. And nobody's immune to it. You can't stop these things from happening. It's components of the market.
And you mentioned the geopolitical issues. A lot of the things we've seen in the last couple of weeks and months, we've seen a lot of the cloud and digital infrastructure coming into the frame as potential targets. We had attacks on, I think it was an Amazon data center in the Middle East. Does that change how firms should think about software and cloud concentration risk?
It does. Particularly in the Middle East, there was a lot of work that went on around data sovereignty, keeping the data in country. That rapidly changed when those things kind of happened. And I understand it. We're a kingdom, they're a kingdom. I get it. Sovereignty, I understand it. But when the politics and the risk actually matures, and it's not even black swan, is it really? It was kind of predictable. It's, as Michelle Walker would call it, a grey rhino. You can see that kind of dust cloud on the horizon. You kind of have to prepare for it before it hits. So yeah, it does change it. It changes it rapidly, and it highlights that interconnected nature of things really quickly, and pretty quickly, rapidly shows what's important.
Yeah, and are you seeing firms still treating now supplier risk, cyber risk, and geopolitical risk as separate issues, given that you just said they're increasingly linked?
Am I seeing them treated as separate issues? I think the problem within our field is that they're kind of being bundled together. Certainly the risks that we deal with, supplier failure, service deterioration, concentration risk, often problematically still remains within cybersecurity. And cybersecurity are not too interested in it. It's not sexy, is it? It's an instruction
Mm.
manual and a legal agreement and process and stuff. It's not cybersecurity. It's not hacking into a mainframe. It's not the matrix. There's no AI involved in it. So very frequently these risks get put on the back burner and decided to deal with a little bit later on down on the line. That exposes all institutions to risk somewhere along the way. I often say to any financial institution, let's just take cyber out of the mix. Cyber is really important, probably the most important thing. But these particular type of risks should be sitting at board level, C-suite, in and around there, because risks only get mitigated when somebody's head's on the block. Heads on the block is maybe not the right term, but until there's a severe motivation to change, let's call it.
Sure. And why do firms keep concentrating risk even when they know better?
Cost effectiveness, economy of scale, new functions, new features. There was a big push to get out to the cloud, wasn't there? That's all the way along the way. Except insurers bided their time, if you know what I mean. There was also then a hidden cost of change, which a lot of people weren't ready aware of on there as well. When you outsource something, very frequently, a lot of companies will outsource the thinking about it too. They'll outsource that risk, but forget that you still own that risk. It's still your responsibility to mitigate, particularly when it comes to SaaS services. The cloud providers purposely, but actual pun intended, declared the issue. They talk about cybersecurity as if it's resilience. There's been a real branding of cybersecurity to cyber resilience recently. It's the same thing, in my opinion. What that does is there's this thing called like the shared responsibility model, where the supplier and the owner own different parts of the risk. But when it comes to supplier failure, that still firmly remains with the end user. They're still responsible for it, certainly within financial services. So they can't forget about it. And everybody's got this big faith in these big companies, big suppliers, in technology in general, don't we? We often forget what we know very, very frequently, forget what we've learned. But technological change happens all the time, I remember MySpace. I remember Betamax. I remember Kodak film.
Yeah.
Market dominant forces dominated, saturated, but stagnated anywhere along the way. Here one day, maybe not gone the next, but gone over a period of time. And, we had to think of the permanence of software and services, but companies fail all the time. All the time.
Yeah. And then when you kind of think of vendor lock-in versus concentration risk, where do they kind of come in people's order priorities to fix or avoid?
It's changing. They're both on a par with each other, except maybe in the US. US concentration risk as a concept doesn't really exist in any regulatory programs. The idea that big companies can do bad things, it's not really represented throughout their regulatory programs at all, which can be problematic in itself as well, because a lot of the big tech companies are actually based there as well. So they're subject to maybe a little less scrutiny. Because of that, it was on the cards to change. It seems to have been parked and shelved for some reason. No comment. But that vendor lock-in, that lock-in stuff is risk, isn't it? I know I'm oversimplifying it, but you should be able to move stuff in and out easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's infrastructure at the end of the day, isn't it? That's what it is. It's critical. You should be able to move stuff in and out. It's the opposite of the old business model for all tech companies. But as technology progresses, as innovation increases, there's going to be a need to move things in and out quicker. Yeah, and all of those tech companies are exposed to financial risks should they fail to innovate as well, really.
Yeah. And where do firms usually lose visibility? Direct suppliers, fourth parties, cloud layers, support models,
Ooh,
data portability somewhere else?
gosh, it's all across the board there, really. Financial services are doing a good job at the moment. Obviously, I'd like them to be a lot further ahead. It's in the benefit of my pension, but I'd like them to be further ahead. Fourth parties isn't happening as much as it should be as yet. Yeah, I don't think as part of these regulatory changes, everybody has to go out there and amend all the license arrangements, DORA addendums or SS221 addendums or whatever you want to call them. I don't think they were comprehensive enough to be able to get the suppliers to do all of these things. The right contractual levers weren't used. Early doors, it has changed. Third-party risk management in a lot of these companies was not much more than a rebranding of procurement. They are learning the lessons now. They're getting these multifaceted sort of fusion of different skill sets as part of operational resilience over time. And they're getting a lot more savvy with it, a lot more as they go along. And it's starting to happen outside of financial services, as we see. Yeah. I don't feel like I've answered your question there, Tom. Have I?
I think so. Let's take it from another angle. When companies map dependencies for the first time, what tends to surprise them?
Okay, so very frequently the application may contain elements of other applications that they weren't aware of. Okay. Occasionally, that maybe the supplier wasn't necessarily aware of. A lot of these suppliers also grow by acquisition over a long period of time. Yeah.
Mhm.
So sometimes the source code to the core application is owned by one entity within the same group, but the bespoke elements are owned by another entity. Also, then there's components within the build process that are like proprietary tools that the supplier doesn't necessarily consider, it's just their normal process. Now, they're integral to that build process, but not always made available to the customer or not available to the customer as part of the standard license arrangement. We've found all sorts of stuff, open source being in there, applications that weren't necessarily owned by any party involved, completely missing source code to critical applications. It's infrequent, but it's frequent enough to be worrying. Let me put it that way. When a company buys another company, they follow a sort of standard operating procedure, don't they? They go, what do they call it? They call it right sizing nowadays, but it's still downsizing to me. They have a look through the staff and they go, okay, that guy John and that guy Paul, they're on a bit too much money. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll replace them with one person. Let's call him Ringo. This could be a good analogy. Let's call him Ringo. Okay, Ringo's great. He's a beagle, but he's no John or Paul. But, he's really standard. He's really standard on the way it happens. And when those big companies come in and they move people on, and there's always a loss of skill set across the board. There's, nobody knows that product like John. And often they come back. Yeah, if they're still with us. Yeah. When you start looking at things like COBOL and stuff like that, the supply chain of capable developers is decreasing of that. And what else? There's a lot of different components that are involved in SaaS services, a lot. The end user isn't necessarily aware of significantly more from databases and build scripts. And we have to produce entire architecture maps of what it is that's in the cloud and how it all connects together. And that knowledge would have normally existed within the financial institutions if they still built the software themselves. We uncover a lot. There's a lot there. And then there's this like fourth layer, this layer of sort of fourth parties underneath it. Everybody thinks the supply chain goes out and out and out and out, but it doesn't. It actually contracts underneath. There's a load of critical suppliers, systemically important in that fourth party layer that right now are not necessarily being picked up, not subject to regulatory scrutiny. That really needs to be identified and probably addressed at some point. There is certain regulatory drivers in the up and coming future to address that.
Where is software escrow genuinely useful versus where is it not enough on its own?
We're used in this stressed exit planning stuff. Right now, a stressed exit plan is there to move safely away from a supplier in unexpected circumstances. They're called different things in different places: unplanned exit, forced separations, whatever. It's the same thing more or less. The latter stage of the stressed exit plan is basically just a procurement process, identifying alternate suppliers, onboarding them, integration, training, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is you've got to carry on using that software to bide the time, to be able to make that informed decision on whether to own the risk or to move away. And that's where escrow, scenario tests and escrow agreements are useful. Because, if you've got a supplier failure and it's already matured into disruption, you've got to find somebody and find somebody quick at great expense, right? Whilst you're down, whilst you're out, while the customers are affected, while your organization is affected, while the share price is affected, while the market is affected. Okay. That's not good. There's no RTO on that, right? It's everybody running around panicking for a long, long period of time. Where escrow comes in handy is it extends this temporary period. It allows you to keep the service running for as long as you need to. I'm not aware of another way of doing it, and I've looked. I really have. Escrow's only really useful for critical services. I'm not looking to put your PDF generator into an escrow agreement. But if you depend on it and it causes a disruption, and if it goes down one day and you phone them up to get some support and they've gone out of business and that's going to cause damage, that's where we come in handy. And particularly with SaaS services, there's a real potential for damage with SaaS services because they can go instantly off. Yeah. And it can be something as minor as they forget to pay the hosting fees. And that's a credit card getting out of date. That's how it can be. But, one of the biggest costs to SaaS providers is the hosting fees. I think they get about 90 days or something like that before they'll get turned off. So the time, report profit cycles, submitting your books to Companies House, that happens every year. There could be like a 9-month, 12-month, 15-month lag in detection of financial instability in that particular supplier. No regulatory requirement to report it. No mechanism for you as a customer to ask that. Hey, have you still got all your big customers? Hey, can I take a look at your commission structure for your salespeople? You haven't got that kind of oversight, and it can mature and realize and present itself on the day that everything goes off. Yeah. It's like buying a car from a manufacturer and they go out of business and the car disappears. You wouldn't do it, would you? But we do it every day with software. We do it every day with cloud services.
Yeah. What about AI then? It's obviously the topic du jour. Everyone is on about it, but is it genuinely useful, for example, in identifying supplier risk earlier?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is somewhere along the way. AI does a wonderful way of marketing itself. Hallucinations. We call them errors, don't we? Faults, flaws.
Mess ups.
Yeah, that's a wonderful bit of marketing, isn't it? Yeah. There's a few of those along the way, but AI is only as good as the data that goes into it and the applications where you can see making right now in short term. And when I say short term, in the next year or so, it's only good where the data's good. And most organizations admit the data is terrible on some level. Yeah. You can see it being extremely useful within financial services, extremely useful within science, the sciences. It's clearly useful within marketing and elements of generation of images and stuff like that. The application outside of that is going to be problematic. But, it's going to take some time, not problematic. Of course, it'll be problematic, but it's really useful within code development as well, isn't it? That's where I concern myself with AI, isn't in the application of AI, where it's going to be used, more on the ramifications on the market when it's rapidly adopted. AI is a disruptive technology, not like your average marketing company that wants to be a disruptor. I mean, a proper one. It drives obsolescence. It will drive obsolescence. And it's not like that example with digital film that I mentioned earlier, where it takes like 30, 40 years to mature. It could be instantaneous, couldn't it? Yeah, something could come out on a Thursday afternoon that massively undermines the value of software companies really quickly. And we're seeing examples of it at the moment. We're seeing examples. We've had, I won't call them close calls, but there was some plugins announced just before Christmas that wiped off about 30% of the value of one of the world's largest CRM companies. There was a blog announced a little earlier this year that claimed some AI could handle reprogramming and reading and understanding of COBOL. That wiped about 30 billion off IBM's value. IBM. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. And, there's some pretty high profile stuff going on at the moment with Mythos and Glasswing and stuff. This is just going to carry on. Yeah, there's going to be what they call in financial services adjustments to the value of these big companies. Yeah. What happens when you've got a critical piece of software that takes 18 months to 2 years to move away from, where the supplier is maybe valueless or is bare minimum is hemorrhaging customers to the competition? What does support of that application look like going forward to you as part of critical national infrastructure or as part of the financial services community? They're all going to want to move, but they need to carry on using the stuff that they've already got in place. It's predictable, isn't it? There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. Yeah. There'll be some big winners and there'll be some big losers. That's why there's this arms race going on, isn't it, Tom? That's why everybody wants to master AI. Innovation is a threat to market dominant forces.
No.
I'm not being very positive here, am I, Tom?
No worries. What would you say if we take a step back and kind of take a 10,000-foot view of the space? What are most leadership teams misunderstanding about software and service provider resilience?
Our elements here is when we tell people what we do, they get it and they get it quickly. And they're just like, oh my Lord, we need to do this. It's just such an obvious thing. Hey, I need access to the spare parts to my car. It's better if we have more than one garage on the planet that can service it. And let's get a Haynes car manual while we're at it, guys. Maybe a couple of mechanics on site. It's obvious. And there's this little penny drop that goes on as people start to understand what we do. They are now increasingly recognizing our services as something called a key control. Yeah, something that can control the damage of a supplier failure, because you can't stop it. It's unpreventable. So you just got to limit how long something's failed for, that impact that it initially has, its ability to get worse, and the cost of fixing it, including fines. And that's what we do. That's what we've always done for the last 42 years. What's happening is across financial services, they're starting to recognize that these risks do need to be mitigated and managed. It's interesting because the first line people are making decisions on cost. Seemingly, second line in compliance are accepting those decisions. And then when it's going to audit say, no. And nobody wants to call from audit, Tom. Yeah, they're coming in. So that three lines of defense model is working to a certain extent. It's the stuff that is getting caught in that third line. That's the sort of in-year costs then, isn't it? Stuff that hasn't been planned for. Let's get these plans in place and stuff. That's certainly what's getting missed. And, the whole cloud stuff, the whole SaaS stuff, it needs to be treated more critically than on-premise stuff.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because of that instant off risk.
What would you say? I mean, you're raising an interesting point, which we haven't dug into yet. And there's a danger around digital dependency that a lot of boards probably don't realize they have. And it is what you talked about there. It's that cloud infrastructure. I mean, a lot of systems are depending on the same hidden layer, whether it's AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. You might have 5 or 6 services from different companies, but all using the same foundation.
Yeah.
How do firms become aware of that, and what do they do about it? How do they mitigate that risk?
And this is it. This is exactly what needs to go on. These kind of conversations. It's been recognised. It's been definitely been recognised by the financial services regulators. So what's happening here in the UK and under DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, there's these two definitions that have come along. Under DORA, it's called CTPP, Critical Third Party Providers. Here in the UK, it's called Critical Third Parties. And what this is the direct regulation of some of the world's largest software providers. In Europe, they've released a list. I think there's 21 of them. And, we're talking Microsoft and Google, and Tata Consultancy Services, Colt Telecom. They're all big names, yeah. The UK list hasn't been announced as yet. It's due very, very soon, but I've been saying that for about 5 months. So, but that's soon in regulatory terms. And there'll be a similar set of companies on the UK's list. So this is almost like treating these large software providers as if they're financial institutions, making them conform to the same operational resilience regulations as the banks and insurance companies, investment management, pensions companies have to do. Externally, these large suppliers are ecstatic about this change. Internally, it may well involve some change for it. So it's been recognised. The big suppliers, the critical third parties, should I say, they're going to need to be able to more comprehensively demonstrate their cybersecurity and all the other operational resilience elements of it, but also look at their own fourth parties as well. Look at their suppliers. Under DORA, it actually goes to nth suppliers. So, you've got to go another layer down there as well. And stressed exit plans are part of that as well. Supplier failure, service deterioration, concentration risk. And it's going to spread out. It's going to spread out to the other industries. It's going to spread out to the critical national infrastructure. I'm not predicting the future here. It's pretty obvious it's going on. You've got something called the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill here in the UK, which is remarkably similar to SS121 and SS221 within financial services. You've got the CER in Europe. Now that's it's essentially operational resilience regulation, but the European Union has decided to map everything first. So every element of the critical national infrastructure is that to detail their third-party suppliers and send the information into the regulator, relevant authorities, and they're going to make a decision on what the regulation looks like going forward. Digital Infrastructure Act in Singapore. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has just done some wonderful stuff with the communication space and technology regulation that they've got as well, applying this across anything that uses technology going forward. The process is the same: map the risk, own the risk, test them, learn the lessons, keep it cost effective. It's so necessary. It's so necessary. It really does need to happen, particularly within the public sector. Public sector's a downward financial pressure, if you like. Everything's got to get cheaper. It was ravaged by austerity. And I'm not trying to be political, but it's pretty hard to deliver the same level of service with increasing funds over and over again. And, it has been identified, supplier failure has been identified as a risk on the UK National Risk Register for the last 2 issues of it. Strangely, the impact of it has been listed as low, and estimated that the uptime for a supplier failure could be instantaneous or could take as little as weeks. There's a 1 to 5% chance of it happening. Me personally, I think that's a massive number. But what's really unusual about that risk register is that it's made the assumptions that these stressed exit plans are in place. That's what it says. The impact has made the assumption that the plans are in place. We're the largest provider of these plans on the planet, and I tell you, they're not in place with us. Yeah, it needs looking at.
Scary.
It's certainly something I'm attempting to raise at the moment through all the formal channels, but I would just say anything within UK public sector, the government's assuming that you've got these plans in place. Ask your suppliers, just double check, and then give us a bit of selling.
Wayne, if listeners take away one practical lesson from this conversation, what should they do different starting tomorrow morning?
Yeah, okay. If you're in financial services, just ask if escrow is on your control framework. Dead simple, just ask the question. Yeah. If you're outside of financial services, critical national infrastructure, whatever, just ask your supplier. How would we deal with your failure? Do you have any plans on how we could carry on using your service should you no longer exist? Just ask the questions. That's the start of the process, getting the conversation going. A lot of these suppliers, as I've already mentioned, are operating horizontally. They probably got some of these plans in place. Yeah. Yeah. They're probably available to you, but they're only available if you ask. Yeah. I think I'd just be asking those type of questions. And can you tell me your third-party supply chain, please? See, I'm being a bit mean here somewhere along the way, because a lot of tech companies don't have regulatory horizon scanning teams. They don't look at what's coming down and how it's going to affect their business. They do wait for their customers to ask them about things. Yeah, and you don't necessarily change something unless customers start to ask you to change these things. So it's not all their faults. But a vast majority of these regulatory changes are common sense. Yeah. And when you start to get pushback from suppliers on what is common sense, that should start be ringing alarm bells, really. What's wrong with an instruction manual? What's wrong with a shopping list?
When we're coming towards the end of the podcast now, is there any question I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any aspect of this we haven't covered that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
No, I don't think so. And, I really appreciate you having me on. I know I have a tendency to ramble. I seem to breathe through my ears sometimes, don't I? But you can tell it's one of my favourite subjects. This is a severe but plausible risk. And I really want, certainly, our country definitely to have a look at this, because when software disruption hits, it does affect not just people's money, but people's lives.
All right. Wayne, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we talked about on the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Well, quite simply, go to escode.com, escode.com, and all of our details are there. Interestingly, you've most probably already got an arrangement with us, some kind of escrow agreement in place on some level, so you have an account manager. But just Google us there and you'll find us there.
Wayne, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Appreciate your time, Tom. Thanks a lot.